Welcome back to the Bulldog Blitz. I'm Liam Hickey, joined alongside Liam Cohen, and today we do our Illinois High School basketball send-off, with the action having concluded on Saturday night with Bennett taking down Warren to win the 4A state championship, and then before that, DePaul beating Brother Rice in double OT. So we'll recap all of the playoffs. We'll talk about the Final Four teams that made it to the state semifinals and talk about their respective road to Champaign. And what better place to start than with the Bennett Red Wings, who won it all. Liam, were you surprised that they had this much success?
Honestly, if you told me mid-season that Bennett was going to be the team to walk out state championship, I'd say I would be a little bit surprised. But I mean, they really showed lots of great things in the state playoffs. They were by far the deepest team left in the 4A state division, with the most amount of depth all around, along with their starting five. I think towards the end of the playoffs, I had no doubt, but in the middle of the season, I think they flipped a switch.
Definitely, for sure. And they were also the biggest team left in the tournament when it came down to the Final Four, and you can attribute that to Colin Stack, who's their 7'2" center, an absolute monster in the paint. He actually had 22 points and 11 rebounds versus DePaul in their season ender. And they also had Daniel Polyakonis, a 6'9" forward, who has arc and range from deep. He's committed to Southern Illinois. So those two guys provided a lot of much needed height for this Bennett roster. And they also just have so much balance everywhere, because not only that, but they also have Jaden Wright, a dynamic shooter who has a lethal mid-range shot. He came up clutch a few times in the regular season, as well as if you were to say that there was a catalyst for the team, even though everyone's averaging between 12 and 12.6 points per game, it's Blake Fagbimi.
Yeah, I mean, he was averaging 12.7 points per game. He also had 5.3 rebounds per game and a astonishing 6.5 assists per game, an elite level in the high school division. And he was the East Suburban Catholic Conference Player of the Year. And when you think about all the four guys we just mentioned, all of them are averaging between 12 and 12.5 points on the season.
Yeah, I'd say D1 rosters are missing out on a guy like Fagbimi. He's committed D2 to Truman State when I feel like he has the talent to play at least a low major, mid-major D1 school for sure, especially with his performance throughout those playoffs. Now, getting into those playoffs, after finishing the season on a high note, like we said, with that 63-45 win over DePaul Prep, which shocked a lot of people, they kept putting the state on notice. They went into the sectional as a 3 seed behind Waubonsee Valley and Bolingbrook, understandably. I mean, Waubonsee Valley, they were undefeated for the majority of the season until losing to Marist, and Bolingbrook obviously had the Sun-Times Player of the Year in Davion Thompson. But I mean, they had other plans for the sectional. They hosted it, and they started off cruising through Plainfield East, and then eventually Oswego. And then finally they faced their first test against Waubonsee Valley.
Yeah, where they really rinsed them by 18 points. I mean, like you said, Waubonsee was a very tough team to compete with, really only losing one key game in the season, which was to Marist. And this helped them advance to the sectional finals. Bennett's 4, Tyree Coleman and Moses Wilsons, and Bennett never lets Waubonsee Valley into the game, going on a 10-0 run in the first, a 12-0 run in the third. Polyakonis once again rose to the occasion, leading the Red Wings with 23 and draining 5 threes.
You could see Fagbimi kicking it out to Polyakonis there, who drained to trifecta, showing how dominant he was in this game. Yeah, they were definitely on a tear. And then after that, they were left to play DGN, who was a surprise to many because the DGN really shocked the world after beating Bolingbrook somehow 29-26. Total slugfest, definitely a big brawl there defensively. Knocked out Davion Thompson, the Player of the Year, who was only a sophomore. And credit to head coach Jim Thompson for the Trojans, who definitely led this team to overachieve in the playoffs. I mean, led by Bobby Garganto also, who was really massive for them down the stretch. This team, who lost Jack Stanton last year, a Princeton commit, was not expected to go that far, but Garganto took them way farther than people thought they would go.
Yeah, I mean, something you obviously have to give credit to Jim Thomas, because he not only beat Bolingbrook this year, but he also eliminated them last year. But this year, they weren't even noted as a higher team to look out for within these playoffs. But when it came to the Bennett game, Bennett handled them well on their home court, beating them 44-32. Six-man Edvardis Stasis was integral in their win, coming up with a big defensive performance, and it really helped them seal the deal in this lowest-scoring affair.
And remember that name because he also came up big in the state finals later on. But yeah, like you said, it was a really awesome defensive display from Bennett that led them to this big win for them that carried them on into the Super Sectionals, where they played a highly favored Quincy team. This team lofty expectations going into the season, all the way down there in Southern Illinois, where not a lot of people knew about them, but people feared them. They are a tradition-rich school. They were always lurking in the background because they're such a fabled program, and they have an insane tradition. They have 23 state appearances, 13 state trophies, and 2 state titles in their history. The Blue Devils were certainly a force to be reckoned with, and Bennett took care of business once again.
Yeah, Quincy's led by Santa Clara recruit Bradley Longcore, who's a 6'5", 225-pound force to be reckoned with in the paint. They also have Kashawn Thomas, an athletic shooter, and Dom Clay. They got their get back against Normal in the sectional finals after losing the eventual state finals 44-43 in a heartbreaker on the same stage last year. But the Red Wings ended out securing a 58-50 win with help from Wright when it counted. 21-point performance from him, with the team getting another bundle of clutch free throws in the dying minutes.
Yeah, I mean, not really a favorable outcome for Quincy if you're them, but it was nice for them to get that revenge win against Normal after Normal made it all the way to the state finals last year because of it. But yeah, tough break for Quincy. You know, they have a great program there, incredible facilities. They actually have an all-access YouTube page that shows you behind the scenes of all that they got, and it's something for sure. It's great. And then this led Bennett to play Evanston in the semis of the state finals, where they tipped off at 6 p.m. Friday. And just getting a little preview to this game, their last loss was on February 1st heading into the playoffs, where they came up short to Evanston by only 4, losing 59-55. And since then, they had been on an unbeaten run. So they were definitely looking for some revenge there. And then speaking on the Wildcats, let's get into them, talk about them and their road to glory in the state tournament.
Yeah, and a lot of that comes from an underrated talent in senior guard Theo Roca playing a star role, averaging roughly 15 points per game, only player with double-digit figures for points on this roster. He's a highly lethal shooter outside the arc, shooting around 40% on free throws. And on the whole team here, only 2 losses in the past 2 months. These guys have been on a heater, not including the season finale, obviously, against Niles North, because they hardly started any of their starters, because why would you need to? Playoffs are set already. But, I mean, this team, they are on a heater to end the season off.
Yeah, they just have a whole cast of talent, and they're really known for their work defensively. They play a really rigid defensive brand of basketball, but when they played Riverside Brookfield, they were firing on all cylinders. They could not miss from the 3-point range, and that led to them winning by like over 30.
Yeah, I don't know how they snuck out with that win. I mean, Riverside Brookfield, one of the teams in the state for sure.
But yeah, they had a rather easy sectional. You know, they were in New Trier's sectional. Great to play at that newly refurbished zone that they have there. They came in as the number 1 seed because of it. Other notable teams were Loyola Academy, Niles North, Lane Tech, and New Trier. And they lashed 2 whoopings against Leiden and Highland Park to start it off. And then came their first test, which was against Lane Tech. And this was after Lane Tech had beat New Trier by 10, having dominated them, thanks in part to big man Dalton Scantleberry, an all-area player. This guy must be familiar with the Ross Kubler model, because he's been showing the first 2 stages of grief all season. Anger and denial. He's elite, like you can see that right there, that rejection, elite rim protection, and definitely carried Lane Tech to that victory against New Trier. But yet they were no match for Evanston as they killed Lane 56-39. And then after that, limited Loyola Academy to only 32 points, winning by 16, which was their lowest margin of victory throughout this entire sectional, just showing how it was pure supremacy from start to finish.
Yeah, for sure. And then they went on to face a solid Glenbard West team that our Bulldogs faced up pretty well against earlier on in the season. But the Glenbard West was on a similar track that Evanston was. They had a pretty easy sectional round, beating Glenbard East, Geneva in the semifinals and finals, led by shifty and powerful guard TJ Williams and imposing the big Logan Glover. The Wildcats ended up winning this one 47-43 in a really well-rounded defensive battle.
Yeah, it was another brawl there. Glenbard West probably had the easiest sectional out of any team, facing Glenbard East in the sectional semis, I believe.
Yeah.
RB knows them well. They lost, unfortunately, in a crucial game that had them forfeiting the conference title. Shout out Michael Nee. He's going to be a star player to watch next year, as he's only a junior. Then moving on to the other side of the bracket now in the state semifinals is Warren Township. And they've had a very up-and-down season, to say the least. They have not been able to go on a streak of more than 3 games won throughout their whole regular season. So much inconsistencies, a lot of it due to being ravaged by injuries with guys like Javarion Banks. But it was Jackson Davis, who is the most talented remaining player left in the playoffs up to that point. He really took over for this team. As you can see here, he's got this mixtape coming out titled "One of the Top Players in the Country," and you can just see why here. He leads his team throughout this playoff run. At one point, he has this incredible half-court buzzer beater against Waukegan in the sectionals finals that will be played, I think, right here coming up. Here it is. Yeah, here it is right here. Just falling out of bounds, money. Just like Jareem Richmond a decade ago in that same sectional final for Waukegan. Just an absolutely outstanding player. He's a sophomore sensation. But yeah, getting on to their playoff run, other players, what led them to be so successful was that other players were finally starting to step into the spotlight along with Davis.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you look at this mixtape and you think, what can't this guy do? And this was really all throughout the season when he had no teammates to help him. But then Banks came back into play. Javarion Banks had 23 in the regional championship against McHenry to lift Warren to a 58-45 win, and also had 16 more in the sectional semifinals to help take down the #1 seed DeKalb 61-49. And then their big man, Zach Osborne, became the unofficial MVP of the Waukegan sectional after going for 23 points and an astonishing 21 rebounds against the hosts to win the sectional final in a double overtime thriller, 70-60.
Yeah, neither team scored in the first overtime thanks to no shot clock, which definitely is a huge talking point going on, I think, during this offseason that IHSA definitely needs to have. But yeah, Davis, like we said, had that incredible half-court across-the-body heave that somehow went in. Just an absolute moonshot there. And then, yeah, he had 22, 6, and 6, but to him, he was actually mainly limited. If you watch that game by star guard for Waukegan, Carter Newsom, which led Zach Osborne to shine in the paint. This was definitely a matchup where the bigs thrived.
Yeah, for sure. And then they ended up cruising through Rolling Meadows and Ian Miletic, one of the top-ranked players in the state, where the Mustangs actually displayed a pure dominance in their region over the past, really, half-decade. But obviously, it wasn't enough for the Warren Township Blue Devils. They just cruised right through them.
Yeah, I mean, the Mustangs, it's been bittersweet for them because they've had so much success in the past 5 years or so, but never reached that vaunted state semifinal because they've been stopped short by just a game. They never had a 30-win season. That ended this season with that sectional final win against Friend. That means that they went back-to-back, both in the MSL title as well in the sectional final against their rivals. But they did fall short to Warren. Once again, unable to grasp that sectional final heading all the way down to Champaign. So a tough break for them, with such as with stars like the Christie, Max Christie, I believe it was, as well as Ian Miletic, 2-star guys, and they couldn't get it done, unfortunately.
Yeah, definitely a guy to look out for, Ian Miletic. He's a bright future for him. But now let's move on to Rich Township, and where they and Warren have virtually had the same exact seasons when you put them side by side. Both started off slow, hobbling with injuries like we talked about for Warren Township. They both had holiday tournament success. Rich won the Big Dipper, and Warren won the Proviso West Holiday Tournament, which isn't the greatest tournament. The best teams they played were Whitney Young and Lincoln Park, compared to Rich's top 2 teams being Kenwood and Homewood Flossmoor. But honestly, when you put it into the end of the season, this couldn't have been a better matchup when you put them side by side. They both ended their season downhill. The last 10 games, they both were 6-4, which seems to have lost all momentum until the playoffs started. Yeah,
it really looked like both teams were on a decline. I was not riding high on any of these guys going in. Despite them having such a high preseason ranking, it looked like they were trending downwards. And like you said, they both won those holiday tournaments. I'd say that the Warren Township, albeit they had lesser competition, it might have been more impressive considering Rich had home field advantage, which we'll see in a second why that was so important. Because in the sectional semi win against Marist, in which they upset them in overtime, they won 86-85. And it was, as you can see, in a packed home court stadium, and we'll see this guy right now taken down in the final seconds. There's Maris trying to heave up a shot, and it's no good. And there's Rich Township taking it away, fans rushing the court, and that's just going to carry them on with that momentum into the next one against Homewood Flossmoor, where they won 77-64. And this was in the sectional final. Once again, played at home court at Rich. And you can just see here the crowd's going crazy. There's Jansen Coulter knocking down a 3, fighting for a loose ball. Now here it is. And there's Jaden Williams hitting down. He's a star guard throughout this whole conference tournament. He knocks one down there. Crowd's loving it. Al Brooks also getting involved. Here's Arden Eves. He's making one up. And then finally, here's Al Brooks once again getting that tip, getting that catch, and then putting it underneath. So just outstanding play for them overall. Al Brooks really stepped up in this tournament. And yeah, credit to them.
Yeah, and then that put them in the fast lane against the number 1 team in the state, number 17 ranked team nationally, Kenwood, which we kind of agreed side by side saying Kenwood didn't really look the greatest going into the playoffs, holding a close game with Oak Lawn, a team that Riverside Brookfield has beat. But Rich Township proved to be the team to beat, as they were the only team to beat Kenwood this year, defeating them 2 times, and when it mattered most, Al Brook popped off with 27 points, 15 rebounds, 4 assists, and 2 blocks. Jaden Williams took over in the overtime play, scoring 5, and he finished with 16 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. Jamison Coulter had 17, and they out-rebounded Kenwood 35-30 on the glass. And Kenwood kind of got killed by some late-game free throws, which has really been a killer in all of these high school basketball.
Yeah, Kenwood, they got bogged down by, I would say, lack of defensive efforts, as we saw there. Damari Stevens was a crucial player for them off the bench because Alston just wasn't getting it done in the interior. He actually missed a crucial rebound that led Al Brooks to tie it up in the final seconds of regulation. That led him to go to overtime. And as you can see here, there's Jaden Williams just taking over, gets the and one there. And that's going to be some crucial free throws for them down the stretch, going to propel them to a 5-point win. And there's the exclamation point right there as well with that throwdown dunk. So yeah, but clip of the day also, by the way, goes to Devin Cleveland in that game, who had the most filthy crossover at half court I've ever seen in my life. So prayers up for that Rich Township defender, but in the end, they did come up with the win, which is the most important.
Yeah, of course. Now we're going to move on to the state semifinals. First one we'll cover is Bennett versus Evanston, where Bennett did come out with the win, 56-47, in an absolute slugfest. Both teams were known for their slow tempo and elite defensive play, and they showed that, and they showed why on Friday. It was 20-15 at half, and both teams had combined for only 44 points by midway through the third quarter. Then all-area guard Blake Fagbimi then took the reins and provided a spark, breaking the deadlock of points, launched them to a 7-point lead after Evanston had begun to creep back in. But this unanswered run sealed the deal as Bennett began to pull away towards the end, where back-to-back buckets, a pair of free throws, and an assist by Paulia Konis during this frenzy kind of capped it all off.
Yeah, and as you can see, there's Fagbimi leading the charge, Paulia Konis getting it done underneath, that tough finish. This frenzy really allowed Bennett to pull ahead, and Evanston could not come back from after that. You saw earlier Mac Doyle had that hustle play where he made that 3 and then got back on defense quickly, intercepted an Evanston pass, and led to points down at the other end with Colin Stack converting at point-blank range. And that just shows that the defensive grit that Bennett had really carried them to win this whole tournament. And it did not help for Evanston as well that they had some major offensive woes. They went 1 for 19 from the 3-point range. Theo Roca was the only one that made a single 3 in the game. So just if you're shooting 1 for 19, I mean, you're not going to win a game. Let's just be honest. So not great for the Wildcats, but they do have something positive to leave from because they were the team to make it the farthest without having a single D1 prospect. I'm sure that will change in years to come with star freshman Ben Ojala, or as I like to say, Ben Ojelly. This guy's a walking bucket, so watch out for him.
Yeah, and I mean, what a great game that was. But let's move on to Rich Township versus Warren, where this one shocked many as Warren was able to pull out a huge win and kind of cleaning house with Rich Township. Rich were heavy favorites entering Friday night, had the strongest remaining resume. Head coach Lou Adams has already been a 3-time state champion. He coached for Orr during their 2017 to 2019 dynasty run, and sophomore sensation Jackson Davis continues to dominate under the bright lights, runs Al Brooks and the Raptors out of Champaign with a 66-49 win, capped off by an insane 27-point, 5 rebound, and 5 steal stat line. And I think the most impressive thing about this game is that the Blue Devils didn't trail a single time throughout this whole game.
Yeah, and you can see Jackson Davis there showing his versatility as a two-way player, getting both steals down the other end, leading the points. He was so hot at one point that Braylon Walker, their star point guard, tried feeding him a ball on the fast break down below to finish for the easy 2. Instead, he ran right to the corner because he was so hot from 3, and it led to an out-of-bounds play. But it just shows that Jackson Davis, he was not missing that night, and he spurred them to a win in an unlikely upset. And also, some notes to take away from that game as well were that Al Brooks was severely limited. He had 13 points and 13 rebounds, which is still, I mean, that's a double-double.
Yeah,
that's still insane.
Impressive game.
But Zach Osborne and Jack Wolf were able to dominate him down low and kind of clog him up. Jaden Williams excelled because of that. Jansen Coulter had only 4 minutes in this game, was playing with an injury, which led Williams to excel with 18 points. So excellent guard play in this game for sure, between Davis and Williams.
Yeah, for sure. And we touched on this earlier. We talked about how the injuries really came through for the Blue Devils towards the end of the season. And that was like Javarion Banks, he came back and he played when they needed him the most. He dropped 14 points and 6 rebounds coming off the bench as the 6th man for the Blue Devils. And I mean, without him, I think the Blue Devils could have definitely had a tighter game, but I mean, it was pure dominance.
And that will take us to the state championship, where Bennett played Warren. In the game, it did not disappoint. They won by 1 point, 55-54. Bennett, who was known for their potent attack all season, shows out defensively. Here's Fabimi taking through a spin cycle on a Warren defender there. His flashy plays really helped him to this win right here. He had 14 points and 6 assists, but it was Polyakonis who led the team, scoring 17 and 6. Mac Doyle, another key player as well, he emerged in the state tournament as a defensive stud for the team. And here's the final play moments right here, I believe, where Fabimi will draw a charge against Braylon Walker, and this was in the final seconds. So Warren has a chance to come back from behind here and finish this game off with less than 10 seconds left to go. And then here's the final play. They're almost, as Jackson Davis gets a jump ball here that Zach Ryan is able to call a timeout on real quick. And this leaves only 0.3 seconds left on the clock. Not much time at all. So Warren is going to be left looking to inbound here on a play. And they're trying to be looking for a tip because that's all they're going to have time for. And like I mentioned, Edvardus stasis from earlier, look what happens right here. Blocks it. And that's the game as time runs down. Bennett are your 4A state champions, overcoming the Blue Devils. And the Red Wings are victorious for the first time in their history. Because talk about Gene Heidkamp, who has been a legendary head coach for them. He took them to the state finals 3 times before this, losing in all 3 appearances, both in 2023, 2016, and 2014. So this was a long time in the making.
Yeah, and what a way to end off the season for Bennett. They scored 62 or more points in each of their last 12 games in the season, averaging 70 points in that stretch. And when you look over on the other side, the Blue Devils side, you still have a masterclass from Jackson Davis. He put up 17 points, 8 assists, and 7 rebounds. But obviously, in the end, it wasn't enough, as Mac Doyle emerged in the state tournament as a defensive stud for Bennett on the other half. But he bogged down Jackson Davis towards the end of the game, and that's where it really mattered.
And so the Bennett finally lifted the title at around 11 p.m. last night, super late, and that's in part due to DePaul's game going into extra minutes against Brother Rice, shifting over to the 3A state playoffs now, where DePaul did the unthinkable and three-peated. They beat Brother Rice in the finals, but we'll take it back a notch, starting with the state semifinals, where St. Patrick was a huge story going in. They were a storied program. They had reached their first state tournament in school history after being established all the way back in 1896, and they had to square off, unfortunately for them, against Brother Rice, led by Marcos Gonzalez, Caden Workman, and of course, Jack Wegas, the shooter. As you can see here, here's plays from Wegas and Gonzalez. And one thing to note is that Brother Rice's ball movement is on another level. They really don't dribble much. It's pass, 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 getting it done here, and then here's the kick out, I believe. Yes, and then Wegas drains it here, and that's really the sinker. So they breezed past St. Patrick by 15, limiting them to only 33 points on the night. Not a great way to go out, but the fans are going to be happy for the fact that the Shamrocks made history.
Yeah, and obviously that game set up our state finals for DePaul and, Brother Rice, where for really on DePaul's side, the expectations could not be higher. They were the highest ranked 3A team throughout basically the whole entire season. They were the number 3 seed among all teams, including the 4A division. This team has somehow gotten better the past 2 years, and I mean, when you look at their roster, I don't know how they are going to get worse next year, as they have tons of returners. We'll touch on that later. And what does this team do? under the bright lights in the biggest moment of the year, they answer. They come out, first they won the Pontiac Holiday Tournament, won the Catholic League Conference title, and on Saturday, obviously, under the biggest lights of the season, won 55-52 in double OT in downstate against Brother Rice. What a game this was.
Yeah, as you see, they're chanting, "Play that Rod Wave." That's been their slogan throughout this entire campaign in 2025. They came down from behind by 6 with 1:45 left. It looked like Brother Rice had it. But Mekhi Kavami and Rashawn Porter had other plans. Mekhi Kavami was named the Slow Shade Player of the Week for his dominant performance, but he actually didn't score a single bucket through the first 3 quarters, but he led them in overtime, finishing with 16 points, 9 rebounds, and 4 assists. But it was actually, according to IHSA, Rashawn Porter who was the player of that game, and I'd agree, because he had a double-double, going for 14 points and 11 rebounds, had a ruthless dunk at the end where he actually kind of jammed his finger. He was hurting a little bit, but after that, he sunk the and one to put him up by 4. Jack Wiggins tried going down. He eventually did make it, but it was still not enough because it was 53-52, not enough time left. And as you can see, we played earlier, Raikan Wu blocked out that final ball, and that was it. DePaul three-peated, and like you said, it looks like they might be going for the 4-peat.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at their roster for next year, Kavame, who has been a starting guard for all 3 championships or runs, he is really their only loss. He's going to be playing at Western Illinois next season. But let's look at the other guys. We got Raikan Wu, we got Porter, we got AJ Chambers, and they're all returning for next year. And these are key players that were on this roster. Raikan Wu really had an insane campaign throughout the regular season. Obviously helped out having some studs by his side. But they will likely get moved up to the 4A division, as we saw for football, the rules changing, and DePaul obviously just being a force to be reckoned with in the 3A division. Someone else got to win that championship, but I wouldn't doubt DePaul in the 4A division.
Yeah, I mean, you can't keep putting them down in 3A if they're going to be winning state after state after state. So moving up to 4A, I believe, is the correct choice. And I don't know, they could still definitely win in the 4A. Mm-hmm. I mean, they were actually ranked as the #1 team overall in the state with the final postseason rankings. So watch out for them. And that will conclude our coverage of the 3A and 4A state playoffs and finals. But stick around on YouTube, because as we say goodbye to high school hoops, we gladly welcome in some March Madness and some college basketball. We'll have an episode coming out soon where me, Liam, and then also Colin Semino and Henry Jurgens will be talking some ball, giving our picks, going region to region in the brackets, and trying to build the perfect bracket. So stay tuned for that. But for now, so long from the Bulldog Blitz.
Hey.
Bet. Great.